Hi class, today we're going to be talking about sex and gender, so let's get started with the presentation. Okay, so let's get started by defining what sex is. Sex is the biological differences between males and females, and that occurs at the cellular level, at the hormonal level, and at the anatomical level. The cellular level means the chromosomes that we have, right? Our genetic code. The anatomical includes these physical differences, either on the inside or on the outside. And when we think about sex, we usually think of a traditional two-sex model. So at the bottom here, you'll see the female and the male in the columns, and the chromosomes, hormones, and organs in the rows. So females have two X chromosomes, while males have an X and a Y chromosome. Females produce estrogen as their hormone, while males produce androgen. And the internal sex organ for females is ovaries, and for the males it's testicles. And the external sex organ is vagina for female and penis for male. So this slide is a table for the human sex characteristics, and again it has females in one column, males in the other. Now we already went over the chromosomes and the dominant hormones and even the primary sex characteristics. What I want to pay attention to on this slide is the secondary sex characteristics. So at the bottom there you'll see the secondary sex characteristics for females. And when we're talking about females, we ideally believe that females should be shorter than males, that they should have larger breasts, wider hips and shoulders, not too much facial hair, more subcutaneous fat deposits around the buttocks, thighs, hips, and smoother skin texture. Now, when we talk about men, the secondary sex characteristics that we expect males to have are abdominal, chest, body, and facial hair. So we expect them to have a lot of body hair overall when you compare them to women. They're supposed to have larger hands and feet than women, broader shoulders and chest, a heavier skull and bone structure, greater muscle mass and strength, an Adam's apple, and deeper voice. The fat deposits for males are a little bit different than for females. They usually have them around the abdominal and the waist, and they're supposed to have coarser skin texture, which means their skin is not as smooth to the touch as it is for females. So what I wanted to point out here is that both this chart and the one before it imply that the differences between the sexes is clear, that there's no overlap between males and females, that it's very black and white. But there are some issues with both of these charts, both this one and the one from the previous slide, and I will discuss these issues on the next slide. So what are those issues that I just brought up on the previous slide? Well, the fact of the matter is that many people exhibit these secondary sex characteristics that are associated with the opposite sex. That chart that I just showed you said that females are supposed to be one way, soft skin, they're supposed to have subcutaneous fat, they're supposed to have less body hair, while males are supposed to have the opposite of that. A denser bone structure, they're supposed to be more athletic and greater muscle mass. But the fact of the matter is that you can find females who exhibit these secondary sex characteristics that are supposed to be associated with males. So you can find females who are very athletic, who probably have more upper body strength than an average male. And also, conversely, you can find males who exhibit very female secondary sex characteristics. Maybe they have high-pitched voices, maybe they have a very slender body, or no body hair at all. So this whole just having these two separate sex categories or characteristics, it's not realistic because there's so much gray area it's more like a continuum where you'll find people with various sex characteristics of the both sexes. And some people's cellular, hormonal, and anatomical characteristics are sexually ambiguous. So I know we were talking about the chromosomes on the previous, no, I'm sorry, 2 slides before, where we were saying that females had 2X chromosomes and males had XY, and the outward anatomical characteristics were penis and a vagina. But the thing is that there are some people that are born intersexed. That's about 1 in 1,000 are being born intersex or hermaphroditic, which means that they have an abnormal chromosomal makeup, and they have mixed or indeterminate male and female sex characteristics. So they might have a vagina, but it also looks like they have a a penis, or it looks like they might have testicles. So it's like a mixed sort of external sex organ. And so for this reason, biologist Anne Fostel-Sterling suggested that we have at least 5 sexes and not just 2. And we're going to go over her 5 sex categories on the next slide. Okay, so now we're moving on to the 5 sex categories that Fostel-Sterling gave us. And we already went over the male and female sex categories, and we also already talked about the external and internal sex characteristics for males and females. So now I want to get into the 3rd, 4th, and 5th categories. And the first one is a true hermaphrodite. So a true hermaphrodite has ambiguous genitalia. So what does ambiguous mean? It means unclear, inexact. You can't really tell if it's a penis, you can't really tell if it's a vagina. Internally, they have both sex organs. They have both testes and ovaries. And from their chromosomes, genetically, they have 47, at the 47th chromosome, they have XXY, 46XX, or XY, and they also have here at the bottom 45X and then XY. Now, sometimes my students ask me if true hermaphrodites have both testes and ovaries, does that mean that they can have children with themselves? And I always tell my students, no, they cannot. I know it sounds like a dumb question, but every class I've had always asks this. So they cannot have kids with themselves because usually for these true hermaphrodites, only one set of the internal sex organs works for them. So it's either going to be the testes or the ovaries. And what the other one that doesn't work, it's like a non-functioning set of sex organs. The next category would be the male pseudohermaphrodites. So the male pseudohermaphrodites, they have, again, they have ambiguous genitalia, but it's more female than anything. They usually have, they don't have a penis, like a normal, I guess you could say, or a traditional looking one. It's more like an enlarged clitoris for them. And then for the internal sex characteristics, they do have testes, but they don't have ovaries. Okay, so they have the sex organs that are corresponding to their genes. So genetically, they are a male. They're a male, but the only thing that's different about them, I guess you could say, is their genitalia, because it doesn't quite look like how society would call a normal set of genitalia. The last category here is female pseudohermaphrodite, and they have male-looking genitalia, which means they might have, the females might have a vagina that looks a little bit fused, almost like if it was meant to be a set of testicles, and they might have an enlarged clitoris. They have ovaries internally, and they do not have any testes, and they are genetically a female. So these are genetically females, only that their outward external sex characteristics look a little ambiguous. Okay, so I usually do this activity in a physical class, and I have my students get into groups and answer this question. The question is, what lessons were you taught for how to be a proper boy or girl? And how were you told to act? And usually my students, they come up with a couple of responses, and the reason I'm going to give them to you is because we can't do this activity through online. So for my males, they usually come up with be tough, be athletic, be aggressive, be daring, and things of that nature. For my females, they'll say act feminine, sit your legs when you sit with your legs crossed when you sit down, wear makeup, wear dresses, don't talk too much, clean the house. So a bunch of different characteristics, a bunch of different experiences that they've had. Now, that's important because that helps me set up this next slide, because now we're going to get into gender. We've been talking about sex so far, but I want to tell you guys what the difference between sex and gender is. So what is gender? Well, the definition of gender is the physical, behavioral, and personality traits that a group considers normal for its male and female members. So at this point in the class, I point out to them that the things that they've written on the board, like for males they wrote be tough, or for females they wrote be sweet, be feminine, sit with your legs crossed. So these are all physical, behavioral, or personality traits that they're talking about. They're talking about gender. They're not talking about sex. Sex is what you are biologically determined as, while gender is more of an action. And not everyone practices gender in the same way. You will have people that are genetically a male, but they will exhibit behaviors or physical mannerisms of a female. Same thing with females. You'll have a female who's genetically a female, but she will act more like a male, right? She'll be aggressive, tough. She likes to play rough. And so when I talk about gender, I always say that it's more of a continuum rather than a dichotomy. So it's fluid. It's in varying degrees rather than just you're either feminine or masculine, right? It's not black and white. And you can be very masculine, right? You can engage in sports, and you can ride a monster truck, and you can have a lot of muscles, and that would make you very masculine. But you're not always going to be practicing masculinity at 100%. There's always going to be moments in your life, no matter how manly you are, right? There's always going to be moments in your life where you exhibit these sort of feminine characteristics. For example, you could have my masculine guy that I set up already, the one that rides monster trucks and has muscles, but maybe they have a kid, and when they see that kid, they become very sensitive to the kid's feelings. They become very emotional around their kid. They become vulnerable, nurturing, and those are all behaviors that are associated with females. And same thing for females. So a female, sure, she can be a nurturing female, like to her kids, and she can be very sensitive and emotional, but there is going to be times where that female enters into her, into the professional realm, and she starts being more masculine, right? She starts being more aggressive and giving orders and being competitive and being active and rebellious. And so, like I said, it's in varying degrees. Gender is practiced in varying degrees. You don't always do gender on one end of the spectrum at 100%. You're always going to be kind of moving up and down that continuum. Okay, now we're going to move on to the nature versus nurture argument. And the question with that is, how do we know our gender? How do we know to behave in a masculine or in a feminine way? Is it that we are born this way, which would be nature? Or is it nurture, that we're brought up this way, that our parents, our peers, the media, all of those different institutions socialize us to be male or female? So, what do you guys think? Do you guys think it's nature or do you think it's nurture? Well, there's two schools of thought, and one is the essentialist school. And if you are a biological essentialist, you believe that your gender should be based on your biological or genetic makeup. And what I mean by base is that your biological or your genetic makeup is going to make you act male or it's going to make you act female. Then there is the social constructionism, which states that gender is a product of our social interactions. Interacting with our parents, interacting with our peers, or even watching television shows teaches us, it socializes us into our gender. Sociologists, they see the importance of both. If I was to say which one is more important to them, they would probably go on the side of socialization, but they also do see the importance of biology. They see that biology has an influence on who we are. And the reason for that is that there's many cases of people, um, acting according to their biological makeup. And one such case would be the case of David Reimer. So let me tell you about David Reimer and why he's such a good case for this essentialist argument of gender. Now, when he was born, David was born as a twin in 1965. There's a picture of his mother and himself and his twin. And his mother took his brother and himself to go get circumcised. Well, during the circumcision procedure, one of the doctors, I guess, was nervous and he actually burnt half of David's penis off. Now, the mom was very much um, affected by this, and she was crying, she was depressed because she was scared. This was 1960s. She didn't know what kind of a life her son would have if he wasn't fully a man. That's the way that she phrased it. She said, what kind of a man is my son going to be? He doesn't even have a penis. So again, I think it was just the pressure of that time that really had her thinking this way. And so she was thinking about what she could do. She wanted help. She wanted a way out. And her way out came when she saw a psychologist on television, and his name is John Money. So he's in that third picture from the left. He's the older man in that picture with the suit on. Now, she heard John Money talking on the television, and John Money was a very famous psychologist. And what he was saying was that he believed that gender was socially constructed and that people could be socialized into one gender or another. Now, that had David's mom thinking and saying, maybe he can help my son. Maybe he can help him be okay with what happened. So she calls up Dr. John Money, and he asks her to come and visit him. And what Dr. John Money does is that he takes, I'm sorry, not he takes, he suggests to her that she should raise David as a female. He actually suggests to her that she should go back to the hospital and remove his penis entirely, remove his testicles, and have a sex reassignment surgery and raise him as a female. And she was a little bit unsure about it, I think to her it was a little bit off-putting, but she was so desperate. She was so scared of how her child was going to turn out that she actually took Dr. John Money's advice, and she raised them as a and she raised David as a girl. And you can see a picture, the second one from the left. You can see a picture of David and his twin brother, but David is, looks like a girl and is dressed in girl clothing, and the brother looks more male. And so, one thing that I wanted to tell you guys is that as David was growing up, his features started to look more boyish. I mean, you can see in the picture, the one where he's next to the psychologist John Money, in black and white there, he looks a little bit more masculine. And he also acted very masculine. He would like to climb trees. He would love to play with his brother's toys. He was a very aggressive kid. And the mom, she was confused. She would tell Dr. John Money, I don't know why David is acting this way. I'm raising him as a girl. Of course, that wasn't his name, by the way. She wasn't calling him David. She was calling him, I think she was calling him Brenda. So she would say, why is Brenda acting this way? I'm doing everything I can to make sure she grows up as a normal girl. And what Dr. John Money would do to appease Brenda's mom was say, don't worry, everybody goes through tomboyism one time or another. And so after that, the mom started noticing that David was, going into his adolescence, his teens, and he was starting to look even more boyish. And what they had to start doing was giving him hormones. They had to start giving him estrogen so he would be able to grow breast, and so that his voice wouldn't start cracking, like a male's voice would. And during this time, David was having a tough time adjusting psychologically because he always felt like he was not a girl. He always felt different. He always felt like he was meant to be a boy. But everybody kept telling him that he was a girl, right? But he just had this feeling deep down inside that he wasn't. And he was very depressed about this because he didn't fit in. His classmates didn't accept him. He was a loner. He never felt like himself, really. And finally, he threatened his mom with suicide. He said, I can't go see Dr. John Money anymore. I don't want to see him. I'm sick of it. I don't even want to take the hormones anymore. I don't want to go to the hospital at all. I'm done with everything. I'm just done with it. And so finally the mom broke down and she told Brenda that she was actually a male and that she was born as David. And he was so happy, relieved, but also shocked and sad that they would have done this to him. And as soon as they told him that, he started living the rest of his days as a male. And he started wearing his hair the way males would wear their hair, and he again stopped taking hormones. And you can see the last picture there on the bottom is of David Reimer when he was much older. And I think he was 30 something there. Anyhow, he ended up telling his story to various news outlets, and they also wrote a book about him. But it had a very sad ending. He actually ended up suiciding, and his brother, who was schizophrenic, also ended up suiciding. So it's a very sad story, and I kind of wonder whether or not, if this thing hadn't happened to him, would he still be alive? I think he would. If they hadn't done this to him, would he still be alive? If they had just raised him as a boy and taught him to not feel less than, I think he would have been okay. But again, this is really good evidence that gender is natural, that it's genetically based, that as much as people want to try to make you act in a certain way, there are some things that are just, you're born that way. That's the way you're going to be. So we just made the case for nature, now let's make the case for nurture. So this is the social constructionist talking about gender roles and how we're socialized into our gender. And the first point that social constructionists make is that expressions of masculinity and femininity are developed and reinforced through socialization, through these agents of socialization. So who are these agents that they are talking about? They're talking about your family. They're talking about peers. They're talking about the media, like the sort of TV shows you watch, the type of films that you watch, the sort of magazines that you read. So all of these agents are giving us an idea of who we have to be, whether it be male or female. And the other argument that social constructionists make is that we lack the complex instincts that narrowly determine our behavior. And the example that I gave you earlier is that no one ever does gender at 100%. You know, you could be the manliest man alive, yet you will exhibit some of these so-called feminine characteristics. You might be emotional or nurturing or soft. And the same thing goes for females. You can be aggressive, you can be competitive. Um, and and if it was a case that, you know, our genetic code, you know, was determining our behavior, then everybody would act the same. All the females would act the same and all the males would act the same. But you don't see that, right? You see females who are more tomboyish, or you'll see males who are more sensitive. The other point that they make is that there are transgender individuals. So there are people who are born genetically male or female, the way that Caitlyn Jenner is, right? Caitlyn Jenner was born genetically a male, but she still felt like a female. So if it was genetically determined, if it was all about nature, then why isn't Caitlyn Jenner still behaving like a male? Because it's not all about that, right? There's something else to it. And so this gender role socialization starts as soon as we're born. You know, as soon as you find out the sex of your kid, you are already out there buying, you know, little girls or little boys clothing. You pick either a boy or a girl's name, and some parents may even put a little bow on their girl once they have their little girl in a cradle, or like a little like a car seat, and they're out in public showing off their little girl to people. Sometimes strangers, when they're looking at the kid, they can't really tell if it's a boy or a girl unless you have the ears pierced or unless you have a little bow on their head. So there's even clothes that you can buy, right, that will show people the gender. Like it'll say daddy's little girl or mommy's boy. And so these are all the types of socialization that are taking place as soon as we're born. And a very interesting study that your book brings up, it's about like behavioral aspects of male or femaleness. And what they found was that mothers look and talk to girl infants more than boys, right? What is it? Why is it that mothers are looking and talking to their girl infants more than boys from birth to the first 6 months of being born? And how does that affect these girls? Well, one thing we know is that females are able to develop their language skills a lot sooner than boys. And, you know, a lot of people say, oh, well, that's just something that's genetic. Females are just naturally disposed to be able to talk more. But the thing about it is that these studies show that mothers actually look and talk to their girls a lot more. So of course they're going to develop language at a much quicker rate. And then for boys, the boys receive more touching, holding, rocking, and kissing, but by the time they hit 6 months, it's reversed. In other words, they kind of just let them be, you know, kind of let them do their own thing. So they're not so attached to their mothers anymore because their mothers just let them be adventurous. And they did this other study where they had boys and girls on a playground with their mothers, and they found that whenever the mothers with female children would let their females kind of roam around, they wouldn't let them roam too far. But when it was males, they would let them be more adventurous and be more feet apart from their mothers than with the females. So what are other male and female differences that are reinforced through socialization in early life? So you could think of colors, right? Some colors are off limits. If you were a little boy in third grade and you said that your favorite color was pink, everybody would look at you weird. That's just not an acceptable color for a male. Same thing for females. If you said your favorite color was blue, you would get a lot of um, back talk for that. People would be criticizing you. Toys, you're only supposed to play with certain toys if you're a female, and if you're a male, you cannot play with dolls. Appropriate gender behaviors, so females shouldn't be tomboys or climbing up trees. However, it is more acceptable. It is more acceptable for females to take on male behaviors than it is for males to take on female behaviors. Because when males take on female behaviors, they are labeled as being gay or sissies. So it's a tougher world, I'd say, for men in general. Okay, now let's move on to gender displays. So socialization is ongoing according to social constructionists, and the reason that people act feminine or act masculine is because we receive positive and negative feedback based on our gender performances. One such example could include skirts. If you're a female and you wear a skirt out in public, you're not going to get much backlash from that. But if you're a male, and actually I think one of the famous movie stars' little kids did that. I think it was Will Smith. Will Smith's son, I think it's Jaden Smith. He wore a skirt out in public. I think he was wearing pants underneath, so it wasn't very feminine, but he was wearing a skirt, and a lot of people were criticizing him for wearing a skirt, and they were saying, what is he? Is he transgender? And what Jaden was doing was just trying to challenge this status quo of what a boy or what a male should look like. Another example would be a female dressing in men's clothing out in public. Now, I think it's become much more normalized now, especially in the gay community. A lot of females who are lesbian, some of them feel comfortable wearing men's clothing more than they do female clothing. It's not all lesbians though, this is just a certain type of lesbian. And so people still give these females negative feedback. If they see them, they might stare at them a little bit. If a female that looks like a man goes into a restroom, a female's restroom, they might kind of stare at them and wonder if they're female or male. But there's always things that give it away, like their face. Sometimes they have softer features, maybe their hair, maybe their mannerisms are not quite masculine. So yeah, we're constantly performing our gender. And these categories of gender, the reason they're so important is because if we're not able to figure it out, like, you, me, or whoever, that when we're out in public and we're not able to figure out what this person is, we may not know how to proceed. I mean, we really take it for granted how important these categories are, when we're dealing with people, because it does change the way we act. I would argue that some of us change the way we behave based on it being male or female, right? Whether the person is male or female, or whether we perceive them as male or female. So I want you really to think about, if you had ever been in public and if you met somebody that didn't quite look male, but at the same time you couldn't really figure out if they were female. Now, when you deal with somebody that has an ambiguous look to them, it makes it very difficult to proceed, because a lot of our interaction is predicated on the knowledge of that person's gender. And so if we can't figure it out, we feel a little bit awkward. And my last point is people do gender. It's a performance rather than something instinctual, rather than something natural. And we're constantly performing for one another. And sometimes when we don't feel like performing, say if we're in a backstage area, like in our room by ourselves, we are just ourselves, right? We're not really performing gender. But when we're out in the public arena around people, then we feel more pressured to perform. And I've dealt with this too when I'm with my friends and, they don't see me wearing makeup or they don't see me wearing something, cute. They might criticize me. They might say, well, why didn't you wear makeup? Or why didn't you do your hair? Or, so they are demanding a performance of gender. And sometimes I just don't feel like it. So an example that I can give you is the Kathoey of Thailand. These are known as the Lady Boys, and hopefully this video works. If not, I will give you the link to it. Hopefully you all enjoyed that video and the twist ending, which is that all of these females that you just finished seeing are actually males. And so that is a perfect illustration of this performance of gender, how we do gender. Now let's move on to women's gender roles. So women's gender roles. Women continue to face pressure to be thin, beautiful, submissive, sexy, and maternal. And if you look at all those words, right, sexy and maternal, it almost doesn't go. They almost seem like the opposite of each other. How can you be sexy and maternal? So these expectations, I feel, are a little unrealistic. Films, television programs, and magazine ads, Photoshop, they all contribute to this idealized image of feminine beauty. And right here on the right, I have an example of how the media loves to manipulate images so that they could look more perfect, right? More up to their standard, when the original images can be just as great, but they want to make everything look almost fake. And so here's two pictures of Lorde. One from, I think one was manipulated at the top, and then at the bottom was her in concert. So it says, I find this curious. Lorde is saying this. 2 photos from today, one edited so my skin is perfect, and one real. Remember, flaws are okay, and then she has a little smiley face. So she's criticizing what the media is doing to her and smoothing out her face, making her look perfect, when in fact, she's a teenager, she has acne, and, her face does not look flawless. Her curls do not look all perfect the way they do in the top photo. They actually look a little bit more relaxed, but they made it look a little bit more textured and neat, when in fact it wasn't looking like that. So the media does this, time and time again. I'm going to skip over to the next slide, but I did want to just point out that this idealized image of feminine beauty, this makes women feel like they're not beautiful, that they have to live up to the standard of the supermodel or else they're no good. And really, there's only like 6% of women that fit this body type overall. And it's just dangerous to assume that all women should fit this mold when really not all women look like that. Here's another example of the manipulation of images by the media. This is Khloe Kardashian, and when she released this picture of herself from a photo shoot from a fitness magazine, people responded on Twitter saying that the photo was faked, that it was photoshopped, and they were shaming her for using these methods of manipulation to make herself look better and creating this unrealistic standard of beauty. And when when all was said and done, she actually released the original image so that she could stop all the trash talking. But you could see that they did lengthen her legs a bit. They smoothed out the thigh. They do look fake. I mean, if you look at her legs, they almost look like they're painted. Um, her body was slimmed down a bit. Her tummy, her back was arched more to make her look, more sexy, more appealing. Her hair was also fixed to look a little bit blonder, lighter, and her face was smoothed out. Look at her face. You can see the difference in her face. They manipulated her cheeks. They they messed with the lighting a bit on her cheeks and her eyes. I think they might have arched her eyes a little bit more. So even by releasing the original, I think it's still showing that the Photoshop was done, and she was saying it was a minimal amount, but there you could tell, right? The finished product looked much better than the original product. Here's just a few more examples of the idealized images of beauty that are advanced by the media. And we have three lovely ladies, very beautiful. We have Kate Moss, Britney Spears, Penelope Cruz. And these are all beautiful ladies, but, they also are having to deal with aging. Now, you have a picture on the right where they look very young and vibrant, and those are the pictures that are photoshopped. Britney looks like she's in her 20s in that photo, and she's actually in her 30s. And on the left, you can see, how her age is much more accurate to how she actually looks. Same thing with Penelope. I think she may be in her late 30s already, and on the right, she looks like early 30s, but on the left, she looks like her actual age. So no one is going to be safe from the effects of aging. I know a lot of Americans obsess about aging, but the thing about it is that it happens to everyone. And why should the media try to cover it up? Are these females the ones that are asking for it to be touched up? Maybe they should consider what if the artists themselves wants to go through that. If they don't, then they should leave it. So anyhow, just showing you the differences between photoshopped and unshopped images. And that's where I'm going to end this presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed it.